You're listening to the Launchcast, the podcast about leadership, business, life, and growth with me, your host, George Andriopoulos.
It's like food for your ears.
At this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast. Ooh, I love that song. Episode 106, A Christmas Carol, Part 2, the sequel. Because we had Carol Silva here, our special guest last week, for 3 damn hours, dropping bombs on us, dropping knowledge left and right. It was incredible. It's the launch dad himself, George Andriopoulos, bringing you your favorite podcast on the planet. We are talking leadership, we are talking business, we are talking life, and we are talking growth, all of my favorite things in the world. And do you know why we're talking about them? Shh. Because it's my damn show and I'll talk about whatever I want. Boom! We're here for part 2, and we are covering so much. Last time we spoke to Carol along with my guest co-host, Jennifer Muccioli. We talked about life. We talked about her career in radio. We talked about the beginnings of her career in television. And so this time we are picking it up right where we left off, talking about her entire television career. We're talking about her cancer diagnosis. We're talking about some incredible spark moments. And then we talk about the comeback, because Carol ain't going out like that, y'all. And so it's going to be an incredible part 2, including our moment of inspiration and the big 3, which we did not get last time because we cut this jammy in half. And so this time you get the big 3, you get the moment of inspiration, and you get a conversation that's going to be chilling. I had chills. I was elated. I was in tears. I was laughing. It was like the roller coaster of emotions that this woman brought us, this legend, this living legend, Carol Silva. So guys, I hope you enjoy this. It is part 2 of our interview with Carol Silva, A Christmas Carol. Enjoy. 12 years in radio, right?
Yeah, I would say
About
I
12?
started in 1975 and I moved over to television. I might even be a little more. There was some overlap. And I moved over to television in March of 1987.
87.
Well, I was in TV before that, though, really, starting in Chuck Dolan is a genius. Charles Dolan, who started
We're gonna talk about
Cablevision.
him.
Oh, my gosh, a phenomenal person. And one of the things that he started, besides cable television, was he started something called Studio 14, because imagine having 37 channels to choose from at night. Who will ever be able to decide what to watch? And he put together this on-camera channel, Channel 14, we called it Studio 14, and we got on the air and we talked about what's on, what channel at what time, and we would help plot out your month. If you watch this movie on the movie channel tonight, then on home box office tomorrow, you can watch this, and you can, it was all done.
Oh my God, I remember
I
this now.
remember that.
Channel
Well, that was
14?
me. That was
Channel
me.
14 was the guy.
Yes.
Channel 14.
Channel
Oh my
14 was
God.
the
That-
guide. We're having a moment, George.
That was it.
Wow.
You're having an aha moment, and that was me.
That was
Yeah.
back when the I don't even want to call them remote controls, the clickers. Do you remember the brown
The
box?
brown
It was a brown
boxes.
box, and it had 3 buses. It had a top level
Yeah.
from left to right, a middle level, and a bottom level, and it was wired to your television. And if somebody ran through the room, you'd say, "Don't trip on that! Don't trip on that!"
And that was the year we moved to Long Island from Flushing, 1987.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I started working there in 1983.
Okay. Yeah, there was
1983.
right. And so 1987, you start as a field reporter for 6 days.
Can I take you back?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm working in radio.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm working at Cablevision at Studio 14 with Ray White, one of the WLIR disc jockeys, and a woman named Carolyn Russell. Carolyn was a Palmolive girl. She had been an advertiser, and she was an actress. In fact, one day we were doing a promo, and we never worked together in the studio at Studio 14 at the same time. We would take different nights that we'd work. And we're doing a promo for it that it was going to run on other cable channels to tell everybody, come to us on 14. We'll sort out your month. You'll never get lost with us at your helm, at your television helm. And Ray White, who I knew from LIR and who I knew from when we weren't on the air, Ray White said what he had to say. And then I said what I had to say. And then Carolyn Russell, who I'd never been in the studio with, and she was a sweet girl, but Carolyn Russell did her thing. And all of a sudden, I realized that that voice that she used on the air was the exact same voice that she'd used when she said hello. And I started laughing so hard because she was that Palmolive girl person, really across the spectrum. And it was so hysterical that somebody actually submitted the video of us trying to shoot that promo to America's Funniest Home Videos. And for years, I got royalties on that.
Wow.
Because I totally could not hold it together.
Wow.
So anyway, here I am. I'm working at Studio 14, and I find out this Chuck is going to start the next great thing, Chuck Dolan. And he believes that 24-hour regional news network is the way to go. And so he creates News 12 Long Island. And there were critics who said, you'll never fill 24 hours. Are you kidding? Now, already Ted Turner was doing it with CNN, but you're not going to do it with something hyper-local. But we realized the best news is the news that's closest to home, right? All news is local if you do it the right way. So I auditioned in 1986 for News 12, which was going to start in December of 1986. I was brought in on Labor Day to audition. The news director, John, I thought, this guy must love me. He's bringing me in on Labor Day. Definitely I've got the job. I didn't get the job, but I continued to work in the building with those people in December as they started on the air. And that was kind of a kick in the pants.
Sure.
I was working in radio. I was the only full-time woman anchor on radio at that point. I really knew the stuff, and I hadn't gotten the job. And it was doubt, and it was disappointment and frustration. And I just shared the same ladies' room with the ladies there. And one of my former interns from WLIR had gotten a weekend anchor job there. And I hadn't even gotten a reporter's job there, which is less airtime. And then in February, the Nassau County Bar Association, because I had a pretty good reputation, invited me to be on a panel. And it was going to be 3 attorneys against 3 journalists. And we were going to talk about whether cameras and microphones belonged in the courtroom. So here we are. It's March. It's 1987. I didn't know anything about law. So I spent a couple of weeks in the law library. And I photocopied, mimeographed some of the pages out of the law, out of the law books. Then, there weren't those little stickies that you can buy now, sticky Post-it that you can, so out of, here my Catholic school training came into view. Scissors, different colored pens, different colored paper, and little scissors, and I made tabs on all this different case law for anything that could possibly come up about the rights to a fair trial versus free press. I did the debate that night, and at the end of it, Stephen Scaring, who was a young assistant district attorney in Nassau County, came up to me and said, "You were amazing. You were awesome. You kicked butt." And then he said, "Why aren't you on that News 12? And I said, "Don't ask me, ask him."
Ask him.
And I pointed to the man next to me who was the new news director at News 12. And I said to Norm Fine, "You'll have a new tape and a new resume on my desk tomorrow." Or I will have it, on your desk tomorrow. You will have mine on your desk tomorrow. And the next day he hired me. And 6 days later, he had me anchoring.
Wow.
And that was the beginning.
Wow.
Yep. And
that's incredible.
And when I think about it, the reason for it was that I was so disappointed, but I didn't quit. Because there's no room to quit. There's no room for a Silva to quit. You don't give up.
Nope.
You just don't quit. You could be disappointed. Time that pity party. Ready, set. And that wasn't a military thing. That was an optimism thing. That's how we grew up in the house. Yeah, you have every right to feel sorry for yourself. Okay, what are you going to do now?
Right.
And what I was going to do was continue to work hard. And that turned into an incredibly successful television life.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I had found this in my research. There's a rejection letter hanging on the wall of your office.
I love it. Now, that rejection letter was from 1983 when Cablevision was also starting something called Long Island Exchange. It was a magazine show, think 60 Minutes, but super
Sure.
hyper local. And I love that letter because it always reminds me that somebody's rejection of me does not mean the end of me.
Yeah.
And I keep it in the lucite frame that I put it in back then as a reminder. I don't know that I would call it inspiration, but as a reminder. And the frame is cracked in the front and it's pushed in. It's those old lucite things where the cardboard fits in the back and you could, kind of unfurl, kind of crack out the stand for it to lean it back. And it's broken in the back, and that's where it belongs. It belongs broken and original to remind me that you just keep going when there's disappointment.
Yeah.
You've got to move forward.
You do. I sometimes would take that to school talks with me, that and my first Emmy Award, and say, people are going to tell you no all the time. You decide what no means to your life.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Carol. Now, I was younger at the time, but I was a TV head, so I think I understood the landscape of television at the time. And looking back now at historical records of how things worked back then, it's crazy to me how this thing succeeded. This News 12, this idea of News 12, and you really helped pioneer as the face, right? Because there's the organization, and then there are the faces that are out there. You helped pioneer the idea behind hyperlocal news, like 24-hour local coverage. How is that even possible? Especially when you think about the times. There was no internet.
Right.
There was no you think about how much information is exchanged now on a minute-to-minute basis versus back then on a day-to-day basis, right? That didn't exist. And so how did that work, right? Like, how did that, what are your feelings on why that was successful? And for my real question is not only as a broadcaster answering this question, but as a woman, I want you to answer that question.
There's so many pieces to that. First of all, Chuck Dolan is a genius.
Yeah.
He knew what people wanted.
A real
When he
visionary.
created, when he wired the first buildings in Manhattan, said, we can get you better television reception. We'll wire them. We'll call it cable. But I know you won't just buy that. And he then said, I'll give you something to go along with it. And he created a little company called HBO, Home Box Office. So it was his genius, number one. I think I was a good pick. And I was a good pick because I love my life. I love my Long Island life.
Yeah.
You picked the right person for that job. My managers say, and no, this is not a humble brag, Shane, ego mom. My managers would say, nobody does breaking news like I do. But I know the island so well. Helpful with that was going to a regional high school. I wasn't just a Daler, although being a Daler is fabulous.
Yes, it is.
But besides that, George, I was, Jennifer, you're a Daler, but you're also regional.
Clayton, yeah.
So I learned more about places on the island. Heck, I dated a lot. And so I went different places. Sure. I'm curious. So I went different places. My grandmother used to talk to everybody in the grocery store. And sometimes it made me a little bit bored. But she wanted to know about people. And my mom wanted to know about people, and I want to know about people. And so that was such an advantage for me. I love the water. I was a lifeguard as a kid. I swam when I was 10 years old, LSA, Levittown Swimming Association. William Levitt put pools in all of those communities. So I swam. So I went to other communities to swim. I swam in Holy Trinity. In fact, my Holy Trinity swim coach was inducted into the Long Island Journalism Hall of Fame the same day that I was. Pat Milton, who
Really?
I still call coach. She is an executive producer on 60 Minutes. Is that phenomenal?
That's
right?
fantastic.
Yeah, she called me recently. Coach and I have to get together in January because now I have time. But so how did it work? It worked because there were enough of the right people in place. And I'm the people who stayed for 33 years there on the anchor desk. So it's curiosity, it's love of where we live. Those are the people who endure, I think, those who love where we are and what we do. Jennifer, we were talking about it before. Long Island is a city. Yeah. We have a larger population than a lot of cities do, 3 million
Absolutely.
people. And I honor that, and I love it, and I respect it. And, as a woman, how did I do it? I just kept working hard. And it wasn't easy all the time. There was one person in particular in my career who did not want my career to go the way that it has. And I just kept doing the right thing. And when you endure and you just keep doing the right thing, you kind of end up the winner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the early days that you were at Channel 14 and Channel 12, how did you come together as a family to anchor? Because it looks, from my perspective, it looks like a gigantic family, and it looks so easy, but I know it's so incredibly not easy, and you really have to have that cohesion together.
Elizabeth and Elisa and Rich talk all the time about how I taught them about family. I mean, they said it in the last weeks. I chose Elizabeth and Elisa to introduce me in the Friars Club in New York City. When I was inducted into the Silver Circle for the Emmys for Natus. And I guess I have to credit my mom, because I learned to think about other people and to do for other people. And that's what I did at work. And I forever have used the term, you get the family you get in the family you choose.
That's right.
I taught my children that when they were little. And that's what I brought to work. And, I wouldn't be one to say, I said Chuck Dolan brought in the right people. I was one of them because I love Long Island. But Elizabeth and Elisa talk about how I brought family to the morning show. They both joined the morning show after I was there, but what a family thing it was. And when I was diagnosed in September, actually Elisa brought everybody into her office and said, listen, any differences we've had, anything that goes aside right now, we are pulling together as the family that Carol has helped us create, and we're going to do all this right until she gets back here. And what a great way to work.
Yeah.
But that means you have to stop and breathe. You can't just snap and say the wrong thing to people. In my marriage, I say I've never called my husband a name, except once. Just to cool his jets, just once. And it was because I never wanted to fight about calling him a name.
Yeah.
Because then we would be so off course from what it was that we needed to discuss.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true at work. In 10, 20 years, people are not going to remember what you said to them. They will always remember how you treated them.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yep, absolutely. You mentioned something before that I wanted to touch on, and then I'll go back. Long Island. Long Islanders have a particular affinity for you, I think, as an audience member, because you're our anchor, right?
Yeah.
There's a big difference to me, to your credit, for helping to build the following, behind hyperlocal news. But there's a big difference between the regional network anchor and our very own hyperlocal anchor. And so because of that, we knew that you felt the emotions that we felt when the big news was happening in our area. Right. And so I think that's why you had, better engagement and a good following, and you were here for 33 years doing this. And that's why you are a legend on Long Island for what you do. You really are. You took the ride with us as a leader, you're one of the ones that not only tell the story, but you're a part of the story, and so I think that's really important. So being that we're talking about Long Island and New York, there are two stories that hit home to me as a New Yorker that I want to talk about, and I'm fascinated with broadcasting, both radio and TV, in this respect. 9/11, I want to talk about. Talk about broadcasting on 9/11 and the feelings and the emotion behind that day.
Doug Geed was my anchor at the time.
Sorry, by the way, I just teared up for absolutely no reason, but go ahead.
With good reason. And it wasn't just the legend. It was the 9/11 reality. Doug Geed was my anchor at the time, and we had these Jets cheerleaders coming in. They were more like a pep squad, not downright cheerleaders then. And he'd gone outside to do something with them, so it was near the end of the hour, and all of a sudden, and I was anchoring some other stories as he was walking outside, and my producer said in my ear, "Oh my God, we think a small plane has hit one of the World Trade Towers." And I said, all right, get me whatever you can, whatever you can, whatever you can. And eventually we went to it, and we went to the devastation.
Yeah.
you know, I've grown up on Long Island. I've grown up in Nassau County. One of the saddest things to me still is the story of the cars that were left in the Manhasset parking lot and the Rockville Center parking lot. For days and days, those cars sat there. I'm getting chills when I'm thinking about it.
Me too, yeah.
It was so devastating. War is devastating, and it was an act of war. It was so horrifying, and our vulnerability was incredible. But when the towers went down, so did the communication towers on the top. And so people couldn't get regular television. Congressman Peter King called us from Washington because he was in Washington, Seaford based at the time. And well, that is where he lives, but he went all the way up to the North Shore at the time. That's where his district was. And he wanted to know what was going on. And he wasn't the only one who called. People called with their stories, and we became the hearth. We spent days and days saying, all right, call, let us know your story. Let us know who it is that are you looking for somebody? And we spent days where that's what we became, because if you do it right, you really do belong to the people. You know, the public airwaves belong to the people, and just the fact that you're cable doesn't mean you don't belong to the people, and the people have a right. And it showed me how important News 12 was. We were the town criers, literally, in the small village that was Long Island. It showed me the importance of what News 12 was, like nothing else.
Yeah.
And yet, it's intimate. It's not the tri-state area.
Right.
It's intimate. It's us. You know, we say not Brooklyn, Babylon. And it was an incredible honor. The first thing our management did was come around to each one of us and say, do you have anybody in the city? Do you have anybody? And I did. My husband, who was working, I don't know if he was at NBC or ABC at the time. And I remember, he was at ABC at that time. And I said, he's on a train. I haven't heard from him. Eventually, I heard from him. But they were great at taking care of us as the News 12 family. But we still had to go on and do our job, like the cops and the firefighters and the nurses and the dentists and, you know, all the volunteers who went in. We had to keep doing our job. That was our job, to help where we could, to reassure where we could, that at some point, someday, we are going to be, in some respect, on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to a new reality, but we are on the other side of that.
We needed that reassurance. We did.
Yeah.
As the spouse of an FDNY firefighter, we just were glued to News 12 because you held it together at a time where we were falling apart. Mm-hmm. And we just needed that hope.
Yeah. And it was everybody's to have. It was rightfully everybody's to have.
I remember at the time, the two things really stuck out of me at the time. One was just that feeling of going from one day where, and I was still in college at the time, so I didn't really know much about the world yet, but I do know the difference between the day before and the day after, and then the feeling of unity that came, right? Which was a really comforting feeling. But there was something in the world that had to sort of be that unifying factor. And for me, and I think a lot of people, that was TV. TV did that for us. And I remember years later just doing the research on this, watching Dave Letterman's broadcast, watching Howard's broadcast, watching, you know, every major news anchor's broadcast and how they handle that, because really was so interesting to me, because I remember at the time, TV was sort of what made us feel okay again. In a way, it was what told us it was okay to start living our lives again. I remember thinking about, well, when are the Yankees going to start playing? When are the Mets going to start playing again? I remember watching the Mets playing the Braves and Mike Piazza ripping a home run, and I started crying in the middle of it, right? I remember watching the concerts, right? The concert for 9/11, and when Friends went back on the air, and seeing the little sign on Joey and Chandler's apartment that there was a little, I don't know if it said "We Remember" or something like that, but things like this, they're what made us feel normal again.
Yeah.
So did you feel a sense of responsibility at the time to bring that normalcy back?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that was a part of everyday life.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, I am fully wearing chills now.
Yeah.
Fully, my whole body to go back there. Every day in news, you have a responsibility to say it's going to be okay.
Right.
Because if it's a car crash that injures just one person, that's the world to their family.
Sure.
And
It's a great observation.
so that's something that I was trained for a really long time to do. That's something that just evolved in me. And I go back to my mom. She taught me to think of others. And that's a great resource. It really helps you understand the world if you're thinking of others before you think of yourself. And it made it much easier to do that incredibly painful job. But probably my whole life, not just my whole career, had prepared me for that. And when there's a job that you've got to do, then you suck it up and you do that job. Like, okay, you had a pity party for how long? I'm talking about me. I'm not telling anybody how long to be devastated about 9/11 because the wound is still a very open wound and the loss is still so real for so many people. But given the position that I was in, I had to go ahead and just do the job. That was my job then. And it's not that different than what radio was in World War II.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, that TV gave the comfort and TV brought everybody together, that's exactly what radio did for people, for all the Long Islanders. We used to have the largest veterans population of any place in the country on Long Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, how many families were waiting for these guys who are now in their 90s, waiting for news about them.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because I didn't really understand the gravity of what we had experienced at the time. Not that I'm not trying to make this interview about 9/11, but it's so important in broadcasting, I feel. I didn't really understand the gravity of where we were at the time until I had that time, years, to really reflect on it and think about it. And then 2 years ago, I was in Hawaii and I visited Pearl Harbor, right? And have you ever been there, Jennifer?
I
I
have.
have not.
you ever-
No.
I've been there.
And so it's a really heavy feeling when you go out there and you take the little pontoon onto, right outside of the ship that's sunk in there, and it's the most insane feeling. You really understand the vibe, and you hear the stories of people that were jumping out of the burning boats into the burning water, and you think, well, I remember when people were in a flaming building jumping out of the 40th story, and I remember walking away from that having a whole new respect for Pearl Harbor, but then having a whole new respect for 9/11, thinking we went through that. We experienced something, not to compare the two, but we experienced a really major piece of American history that was super traumatic. I mean, on that level, and it really made the whole thing just so much heavier for me.
When I went to Pearl Harbor, I remember not a feeling, but a knowing that those lives are still there.
Yeah.
It was a knowing
Yes.
that those lives were still there.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm a Navy kid, because I'm also my mom's kid. I just knew it. I felt it. And truth be told, I have not yet gone back down to the Freedom Tower or that. I will. This is the year that I will do it.
Yeah.
But I went, when I covered, I went there, in the months after, but not since then, not since it's been memorialized and rebuilt. But I know that they're still there, that there is some of that life still there. And I think that there's joy in that that some of those great lives are still, there's a spirit there.
Yeah. Yeah. So being the hyper-local anchor, let's bring it hyper-local. Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
Takes me 12 minutes to get to News 12 from my house. And it took me 2.5 hours that morning.
Wow.
Because I live in the North Shore of Nassau, and there are so many, and the studio's in Woodbury, it's 12 minutes away. And there were so many trees and power lines down that I had to drive into, there was nobody out. I had to drive into oncoming traffic lanes. I was driving across grass medians, and I finally drove over wires. I was trying to avoid wires because you didn't know what was down. And I got to work, and once again, we kicked into gear. One of the most heartbreaking parts of that story for me was we sent Elizabeth Hashagen. Instead of bringing her into Anchor, we sent a camera to her. And she lived in one of the hardest hit communities. She grew up in Freeport, but she lived in Massapequa. And she, her house was flooded about 8 feet up. And I remember when she got to the beginning of her street near Merrick Avenue that she couldn't get down.
Yeah.
And I remember her crying and on air. And that was the story of so many people. A couple of days later, when she was, her street was so bad that it's where Peter King took the head of
I know what you're talking about.
housing and urban
Yeah,
development. I don't remember who it was that went down, but that was the national visit, was literally down to Elizabeth Street. A couple of days later, we could go down. So I went with Elizabeth and her dad, and we said it looked like houses threw up on themselves.
Yeah.
Everything was from the outside.
Yeah.
And we went into the house to save what we could. We wrapped up all of her dishes, any of the kids' clothing, anything that we could. And we got her to Freeport, to her parents' home, and she moved with her husband and her son, who was in a crib. And I think Allie was about 4 years old at the time, her daughter. And they spent months, the entire family, living in her childhood bedroom. And her parents were awesome. Her dad's FDNY, retired now. And I remember Allie was in the diner one day. They went to the diner in Freeport. And Allie said, "You know what?" to the waitress. We were devastated. There was devastation. She was 4 years old. Wow. That was the word she kept hearing over and over again. It was the worst of times, and it was the best of times, and how people helped each other. I mean, it was amazing. And that's the kind of thing where we went to the office and we spent days.
Now I'm covered in chills.
Yeah.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was incredible. And you know what? Some people were really great in helping in the rebuilding. And then, you get your charlatans, and we've done those stories too. I don't know how you can steal from people who are already in such desperate straits, but they will have their reckoning day someday. And damn, we're strong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we are.
We are
Absolutely.
strong.
And I love how you have talked about this, because this really leads into what I want to speak about next. You're a storyteller by nature. That's how you do it. That's how you report the news. You don't report the news, you tell our stories, and that's been a theme in your life. You've been quoted as saying, "Everybody has a story." Right? That's
So
a
true.
Great line. That's a great line. Why did you choose this role within leadership? Why did you choose to tell other people's stories? And I want to piggyback that with, what is your responsibility as a journalist, since you have chosen this role in leadership? What is your responsibility in telling other people's stories?
All right, I've got to go to the first part of it, and then you're going to remind me of the other questions. Everybody has a story, and we all have a responsibility to let people tell their story, to let people be heard. We all want to be heard. We want to be heard at home. So we have a responsibility as individuals of developing ourselves in a way that the people around us, in our home, in our school, where people will listen to us. And that means that we have to teach our children strength, that they have a right to stand up for themselves and speak for themselves, that they have a responsibility to help people who don't know how to speak for themselves, how to help stand up for them. That's what I grew up with. So that's why I'm a storyteller. It's my grandmother in the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's my mother in the grocery store. It's me loving the rock stars' lives more than I love their music, even more than I love their music. It's our oldest, Jason, saying one day to Bob, "I hate going to church because it's an hour and a half." And Bob said, "No, it's not. Mass is like 45 minutes. And he said, Carol, he's my stepson, and he said, "Well, Carol, it's 45 minutes Mass, and then it's 45 minutes of, saying hello to people." I love people.
Yes.
People are my energy. They're my power. They're my source. But I go back to everybody has a story, and we have a responsibility to stop long enough even to hear just a couple of people in a day or in a week. That's that stopping to tell somebody they'd done a good job. That's that stopping to say, well, how did you get here? How did you get to this place? If you think about how we argue so often, you're having an argument with your significant other or somebody at work or one of your children, and all you're thinking about is the next thing you're going to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to make the point. I think I have the winning point here. But when you do that, if you choose to do that, you lose the gift of everything that's going to come at you, which may be self-correction. Maybe you screwed up. Maybe you were really wrong. Maybe somebody's going to say they were sorry. Maybe somebody's going to say, we just have to leave this alone for now, whatever it is. But you lose that if you're always ready to put out. You have to be open. And when you take that in, that's where the stories then come back out.
One of my first mentors early in my career, Carol Beatty, who has since passed from cancer, said to me, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Right.
Just quiet and just let people talk. You have a responsibility to listen and to partner with them and just to make their day and let them be delighted and then get your point of view across.
One of the greatest things that I learned as a parent, and it didn't happen until our youngest, Shane, was probably an early teenager. I remember saying to Bob, I figured it out with Shane because all of, your kids are different. And I said, you learn from Shane in the quiet. You learn from Shane in his pauses. Let's not fill his pauses.
Yeah.
Because what comes after the pause tends to be great. And that's that listening thing. And it's hard to do. And especially in this day and age, where it's constant. You get in the car, you put on the radio, you put on the podcast. This one, of course, you should.
Always this
any
one.
Any Launchcast. But, we're constantly filling the space, filling the silence. And I say, don't be afraid of the silence. I was listening to Joel Osteen on my way here because I'm constantly shoveling in positive to me. And then I said, it's time for silence. And that's when God and I had our little chat that I talked about in the beginning. Did I answer all your questions there, by the way, about being a storyteller?
You really did.
Okay.
Yeah. What I want to touch on is, so that's you as a storyteller leading into journalism. I want to talk about journalism a little bit briefly and the responsibility behind being a journalist, along with truth in journalism and what it means to you, because I think these sort of piggyback off each other. We're in a state right now where, for a lot of different reasons, and I don't want to really get into politics too much, but journalism is being questioned sometimes.
A lot of times. And rightfully so.
And we're in an age where somebody can go on and start a podcast like I did, and all of a sudden claim to be an authority on something or be a journalist, right? And I think there's a lot more to journalism than that. When I do this as a thought leader. I'm not doing this as a journalist. I talk to you because I want to talk to you and I want to talk about leadership. But there are people out there that claim to be journalists and they're not. And there's a lot of untruth in journalism, a lot of falsehoods right now. And so what is your responsibility as a journalist, and how do you feel about truth in journalism? What does it mean to you?
My responsibility is to be truthful. My daughter's getting married April 18th, and she's having her reception at Land's End. We did the food tasting the Sunday between Christmas and New Year's. And the room at Land's End was filled. There were probably, 18, 15 tables, and it was different families. So it was a bride and groom, parents of the bride, parents of the groom, and then maybe somebody else at the tables. And it was a wonderful day, and it was a total food orgy, which was fabulous. And at the end of it, a fellow came to me from the table behind, and he said, I just want you to know we already miss you so much, because my last day on the air was December 20th. And he said he was a Suffolk police officer, and he told me where he was from. And he said, we love to watch you because you tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you love me because I love my cops. And he said, no, I love you because you tell the truth. And I said, if there's a bad cop, we have to talk about it. If there's a bad news person, we have to talk about it. And, we all have that personal thing where you think it's more true if it's something that you agree with.
Sure.
So what we have to do now, what we have the choice to do now, is to do some research and to figure out who is telling the truth. Find those websites where you can fact check things. I mean, politicians can say anything on any side these days. And the television networks, in particular, the cable news networks all say it's this way. No, 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 it's this way. It's completely. I think we have an obligation to not just watch what reaffirms what you think as an individual. I don't mean me, the journalist. I mean me, the wife, the mom, the homeowner, that I should be listening to the people who I agree with, and I should definitely be listening to the people that I don't agree with. And I think that we should limit our exposure. I think that in all of that, we also have to feed in, shovel in the positive. I write a monthly article for Long Island Woman magazine, and I happen to have written one around the last presidential cycle, which said turn off your TV. And I write the articles a couple of weeks before. And after I wrote it, but before it was published, it was announced that Cablevision was being sold to Altice. And I thought, well, good Lord, these new managers are going to come in here and they're going to go, oh, that Carol Silva, isn't she the one who just told everybody in print to turn off their TVs? But I think that we need to limit what we consume. We all have the choice. We all have the choice not to be angry, but to be informed. And it takes a little bit of work. And we all have the choice to feed in some positive. That's what I choose to do. I can't tell people what to do, but that's what I choose to do. And I'm going to say it again. I love my life.
Yeah.
How did you carry that through to setting the tone for you and the family at News 12? Does everybody believe that?
Yeah, that's an organization. That's the standard there. It was with the Dolans. It was at Cablevision. It is with Altice. That's the standard.
Yeah.
Because, I have heard producers who have vastly different political views, and then they write the stories that they have to write.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you said what you said in your article, and then Altice came in. And you thought they were, right? So that's something that really resonates with me a lot. I wrote a piece a while back, and I'll give you a copy before you leave because I'd love for you to read it and give me your feedback on it. Have you ever seen Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise?
I never saw the whole thing.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, but I've gotten up between 3:30 and 2:15 in the morning for the better part of
Perfect.
44 years. And except if I was on vacation, usually doing something else or having a baby.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I have
Gotcha.
a lot of catching up to do.
So Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise, the brief rundown is he's a sports agent. He's a slimy sports agent, one of the biggest agents in the world.
Show me the money.
Show me the money,
I
right?
know that.
And so towards the beginning of the movie has a moment where he just realizes that he's turned into a slime ball. Has a moment with the child of one of his athletes. And so goes to bed at night, and whether he had a bad slice of pizza or he grew a conscience overnight, wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and decides to write his mission statement, which is entitled The Things We Think and Do Not Say, The Future of Our Business. And he goes on to write things like it's about less clients, less money, more caring, right? And he writes this mission statement and he distributes it, the memo, to everybody in his company. And then he wakes up the next morning and goes, oh my God, what did I do?
What did I just do?
And of course he gets fired because of it, because how can you be a big time agent and not care about money? And it resonated with me because one day, a little over 3 years ago, I was sitting in my office, 1 a.m, I had a lot of work going on, and I just got inspired to start writing about something. And so I decided to write my version of The Things We Think and Do Not Say. And it's the same ideology where I realize that as a business owner, I can do more. It doesn't have to be all about profit, right? It could be more than just profit in this world. And so I wrote, and it's nothing big. It's a 12-page little manuscript. It took me about 2.5 years to distribute that to people, to be brave enough to send that out to people. First of all, it wasn't finished. I wrote the first 10 pages in about, an hour and a half. Took me almost 2 years to write the last 2 pages because the story wasn't over yet.
Right,
Not that the story's over.
It was the beginning of the growth.
It was the beginning of the growth. And I think at that point I had understood the growth. And not only did I understand it, but I was brave enough to say it out loud. And I knew that as a thought leader, as somebody that maybe people look to for advice sometimes, that it would be important for me to be authentic and honest about that. So I commend you for being that person because that's something we need. You know, it's something, especially in our journalists.
Absolutely.
You know? Honesty.
Absolutely.
Honesty. The Launchcast is sponsored today by the Leadership Experience, a coaching masterclass. Intentional, unconventional, thoughtful leadership from keynote speaker, CEO, nonprofit board member, and TEDx executive producer, George Andriopoulos. Hey, that's me. Guys, the music's getting louder and it's epic, which means this is something you shouldn't miss. Registration opens on December 15th and we are beginning January 15th. This music is so loud. That means it's amazing. Join us, theleadershipexp.com for details. You don't want to miss this. I want to take a break from your career for a second.
Okay.
Your husband, Bob, who was on Facebook supporting us, supporting you.
Hi, honey.
I don't want to kid myself. It wasn't about us.
No, it wasn't about us at all.
Supporting the beautiful, legendary Carol Silva. Your son Shane, your daughter Connor, right?
And Jason,
And
our
And
oldest.
Jason, your stepson, right?
I don't really call him my stepson. I call him one of our kids.
Love that.
I mean, he was 9 when I got there,
Yeah,
so
love that.
now he's 39.
These people are your rock. This is your foundation.
They
right?
are.
What is the biggest difference between Carol at the desk and Carol at home? That if I asked Bob and Shane and Jason and Connor.
They'd probably say not much, seriously, because I have high standards at work and I have high standards at home, which they didn't always love. I have that we can do anything attitude at work and that we can do anything attitude at home. I mean, there's more makeup, there are more dresses, there are more high heels at work. But besides that, I was in the car one day. Did you ever see Jessica's Affirmation?
No.
You've got to look it up. Oh, you're going to love this, George.
Okay.
Jessica's Affirmation. Jessica's a little girl, and her mom, I believe, posted video of her standing on the bathroom sink counter, looking at the mirror, saying, I love my hair, I love my skin, I love my life. And the first time I saw that, I said, oh my God, I'm Jessica. That's me. That's what I say. I was in the car with Shane one day, and I was talking about stuff, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I love my life. I love my life. And I've done that in the car with Connor as well. And my kids think that I'm a little bit crazy. So that enthusiasm for life, that talking, it's at work and it's at home. When my kids were young, when they were in school, family dinner was huge. You know, I was a Girl Scout leader and I was a soccer coach, so there were some years that were pizza years. You know, there might have been a little more pizza than, you know, fully home-cooked meals. But we've always done dinner together. And then when the kids got old enough, dinner would be about 20, 25 minutes. And then they would clean the kitchen. They would close the 2 kitchen doors, and they would put on the iPod, and they would dance, and they would do the dishes together, and that could be easily another half hour, which was terrific. But at the table, it's a storytelling. Tell me something good that you did today for somebody else. Tell me something good that happened for you today.
I love that.
Tell me
Yeah.
something that made you smile today. Because if you say, tell me what happened at school, the answer is universal. Nothing.
Nothing.
Recess.
Right? Oh, you got recess? I didn't even get recess out of my kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, that approach at work is the same approach at home. And that's because that's who I am. I don't think there's a really big difference.
Yeah. Well, that's that authenticity that comes into play, and it seems like you bring that person from home to work rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
It seems that role has played such a big part of who you are as a leader.
I mean, it is who I am. And at this point, I don't know how to be somebody else.
Yeah.
Do your children see you as a role model? Do they recognize how you've touched people's lives across Long Island?
I think they do now. My daughter's a teacher in Maryland, so she said, Mom, I've been watching on Facebook. It's hard for them to escape it now. Oh, you know what? I'm going to read you something. When we did my last day on the air, then you want to talk about the rock and roll. Billy Joel used to be a regular at WLAR, and he used to play in a place called Ferns in Roslyn. And Fern's was great, and it was intimate, and it was upstairs, downstairs. And one of the guys in his band was a co-owner there, Richie Cannata. Richie's the sax
Yes.
player.
Mm.
And I've
Lords of
remained
52nd.
friends with, the Lords of 52nd Street. I've remained friends with Richie for years. Richie and Russell Javers, the guitar player, and Liberty DeVito, the kick-ass drummer. I mean,
Yes.
the guy is
Yes.
amazing.
Yep.
I absolutely love them. They could not believe that I was leaving, that I was retiring. And they decided to do a concert for me. And they did a concert saluting me December 20th at the Suffolk Theater in Riverhead, which was phenomenal. I also wore a killer outfit, a leather
Yes, you
halter
did.
top,
I
very
saw
classy,
that.
but very classy, everybody says. But it had its moments in my rock and roll roots. It really
Right.
did. It was awesome. And Jason took the train out from Manhattan. He's a banker. He took the train out from Manhattan, and it was a long schlep out to Riverhead. And then he had to get back in the train, and he had to go back that
Yeah.
night.
Wow.
And this is what he wrote to me at the end of it. So when you ask if my kids know, Shane is still a little into the ego mom kind of thing, but I know he appreciates it. They don't tell me that. I'm their mom.
Right.
I mean, they don't really tell me, but they can't miss it, especially now. It's kind of been hitting them like a Mack truck.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Jason is the one who spoke out. And Jason said, on the night of December 20th, he was sitting on a train at 10:36 p.m. and wrote, "You were literally up on the stage playing drums when I had to leave. So sorry I couldn't say goodbye. It says everything. How many people came tonight and wanted to make the night special for you? You know you've done a lot right to create a night like tonight." And I thought, that's it.
That's it.
did it.
Validation.
I'm not dumb. I'm not done, I should say. I'm not done. I don't want to say, I've died and can go to heaven now because I'm not ready for that. But I
Oh,
thought,
I get it. I get it.
I think he speaks for our 3 children
Yeah.
when he says that. And he is not overly emotive. He's not a crier, George, or like my older brother Kevin is a crier. But that meant everything to me to see that. It really did.
I would have been a puddle if I got that from one of my kids.
Oh, yeah.
A puddle.
And the reason that I want them to see, listen, I know I was not always as good and kind as I am. I was not always as soulful as I am. I mean, I've grown into it. I was less
We
patient
evolve. We
when I
evolve.
was younger in business. I remember learning something in the past couple of years and saying, oh my God, why am I learning this in my 60s? Immediately followed by my God voice, or whatever you'll call it, which is, of course you're still growing. If you stop growing, then you're not living.
Yeah.
Of course, you're still learning. If you're not learning, then you're still living. I am a nicer person now. And I think that that's a great thing for my kids to see. I think it's also a little intimidating. I really do, to see this thing, this, like you said, icon. When I was at the Silver Circle, it was David Ushery from NBC said, of course we have, the icon Carol Silva here. I mean, I think that's a lot for a kid to see.
Sure.
So we don't talk about it at home a lot. I mean, lately there have been a lot of newspapers and other
they
things,
know.
and it's been unavoidable. But I don't care whether they know I'm an icon. I want them to know what people are saying and why.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
It's an example.
your mom and your grandma. It's how
Yeah.
you stand on the shoulders of your mom and your grandma.
Absolutely.
And your children will stand on the shoulders of what you have done, and it will shape
So
who
true.
they are.
So true. I guarantee you right now, and it doesn't have to be later on down the line. Guarantee you right now, since they're all adults, your children, that if I interviewed them right now, this same style interview on their lives, and I asked them these types of questions, they would say, well, my mom, because my mom.
Yeah.
The same
Connor
places.
asked me, we're doing a lot of back and forth on this wedding stuff. And she called in the past few days and she said, okay, a couple of questions. I need this address for a thank you for my shower, and I need this address. And can Brooks write? Brooks is her fiance. Can Brooks write a couple of the thank yous? I said, he absolutely can. And he's lovely, and he's been so involved in this. He's smart. He's an aerospace engineer. Literally, our son-in-law is a rocket scientist. But then Connor said, and do I have to write a thank you to you? And I said, yes, please. Because I want to see how she's thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I've always told them. Don't give me a gift. Write me a note. Write me a
yeah.
letter. I want to know how we're thinking, how we're connecting. Don't spend money. I don't need your money. I want to know, what are you think from this whole thing, this whole experience? Because I know now what I think growing up in the house with my mom, my grandmother. I mean, she didn't live in the house, but she was very close by. And my dad, who was so positive. You know, here he is. He's a Mexican-American. His dad moves back to Mexico when his mom died. Dad's mom died when my dad was 2 and Aunt Sarah, his sister, was 4. Their dad went back to Mexico, left El Paso, and sent them to live in a house in Santa Monica with the grandparents. And as the Depression went, more relatives moved in and more relatives moved in. And if you ever talk to my dad, Newsday did an 8-page article on him when he died. In the year 2000, Don Myers was the reporter, and it was a part 2 in the year 2000. Every month there was one, and the article started like this. Every day 1,000 World War II veterans dies in this country. This is the story of one of them.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
And my dad was in the worst. There's no good place in war, but my dad was in one of the worst places. He was in the South Pacific. He was in Okinawa. He was in Iwo Jima. I mean, the horrible things. You know, if you watch Ken Burns, you know how bad those places were. He didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
He talked about what we could do. He took my brother, my dad retired the summer between 3rd and 4th grade for me. And Kevin was going into 5th grade, and Kevin, my 11-month older brother, went to try out for Little League. And he came home, and Dad said, how'd it go? And Kevin said, I didn't make it. There weren't enough coaches, and, you know, we're the scraps, and we didn't make it, essentially. Yeah. Not those words, but that was the message. And my dad said, that's okay, I'll coach. And my dad took the scraps, and literally, they were the Bad News Bears. They were the kids that nobody wanted, and they won. And they played for Allied Deli on Jerusalem Avenue in Hicksville. And my dad he went from being a medical corpsman to becoming a pharmaceutical salesman. And he achieved all kinds of things and won trips, and he was extremely successful. This guy who was in this house, the last year that he was in that house in Santa Monica, there was no room for him anymore. There were families living there. And after he died, for that Newsday article, his cousin Pete told us they hung a light bulb from a wire under the back porch and put a blanket down, and that's where Dad lived the last year that he was in the house before he enlisted. And we said, oh, Dad was like Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was essentially it, but he never talked about that. He talked about what we could do and what you're going to do next. And I had the spiritual side from my mother and the optimism, no excuses side from my father. And that's what I'm hoping that my kids are really seeing.
Love that.
Wow.
Side note, I called up Kristen. Did you meet Kristen from Suffolk Theater, the manager there, general manager? Kristen Passeri.
Briefly, yes.
Yeah, so I got married at Suffolk Theater.
Oh, did you
2
really?
years ago.
Oh, what a great sight.
It was a great wedding.
sight.
What a great wedding
we
that
had
was.
Such a blast. I got married there, and when I saw that your farewell party was there, I called Kristen because I wanted to get a picture. I didn't wind up getting through, and then I had a childcare issue anyway, so I couldn't go. But I was so excited for you for that event. So when I got married, I had Decadia open for us, but
Wow.
Big Shot
Oh,
performed at our wedding.
Mike Dill Judas and company.
Big Shot, which is when I got super friendly with him. And so I saw all the pictures, all the videos. It looked like a blast. I'm so happy for you.
So great.
Yeah.
So great.
So we're winding down here. I want to get to one last thing before we jump into our big 3, and that is when I met you. So I met you at TEDx Farmingdale on September 7th for the first time, and we had been conversing on Instagram a little bit beforehand.
Oh, can I say I saw you on Instagram,
Yeah.
and I'm not a digital native, so you know I'm still doing a little bit of catch up, and I mean better than many people that I know. But I remember I started to see some of the stuff that you were doing, and I thought it was interesting. And I knew you were doing the TEDx talk, and I wanted to see it. And I reached out to you, and I sent you a message which said, I feel like a 14-year-old. You're my first Instagram relationship.
This is great. I mean, I was so happy to get that message because, you know, it's funny when we were talking about PR for the event, one of my goals was to get on Elisa and Elizabeth, our PR person. I think she said she knew you. She works with the Inn, Dana Lopez. She's
Yes.
there. And so we reached out to Elisa and Elizabeth. We reached out to you, and we didn't, I don't know, through the News 12 channels, and we didn't really get anything back. And I said, okay, no problem. And then here you are
showing up to the event.
He hit me up on Instagram, and I'm like, "Well, that was easy. That
It was
great."
meant to be.
And so when you reached out that way, I said, "Oh no, I'm not reaching out to her in the journalist capacity. I want her to come as a thought leader because I knew how interested you were in the impact of
I was
TED."
blown away
Yeah.
by what I told you. I've seen 2 other local TEDx's, locations not to be mentioned.
Yeah.
You blew them away. The I don't want to say the organization of it, but the presentation of it showed the power of what is. It showed the power of storytelling, why it's so vital. And I always go back to, these things are great, but we need to be talking to each other and getting other people's stories.
I agree.
And so you honored storytelling, and you did a fabulous job. And you're doing one next year, and I will be there next year because
thank
you
you.
really just do. And I know, Jennifer, you are a big part of that too. It is the best TEDx I've seen, and you're
Oh, my
phenomenal.
goodness.
You're
Thank you so
phenomenal.
much.
I think we are
Thank you.
just
Blown away.
blown away.
Wow.
Well, you guys blew me away that day.
Thank you.
And so we met during that time. You took an interest in the event, and your presence was so important to me as a thought leader trying to spread positivity through the stage, right? And we had made plans to get together for lunch to discuss the stage and more things, but then I noticed that communication slowed down a little bit. And subsequently, I was dealing with my father's health issues. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer amidst the whole TEDx Farmingdale thing. And I posted,
How's your dad?
He's doing well. He's doing really good. Yeah. And so I posted a sort of cryptic social media post more about like positivity, right? We're going to get through this kind of thing, but I didn't want to call out exactly what was going on. And you reached out to me asking what type of health issue I was dealing with, because I didn't specifically say it was my dad. And when you reached out, I kind of realized something was going on there. And so October 11th, when you were ready to share an important part of your private life, you posted a video with the caption, "Right in the middle of a perfectly good September, I finally saw my doctor about my persistent cough, and then this happened, stage 4 cancer," right? When I found out, Carol, I was immediately drawn even further to speaking with you because cancer has played such a pivotal role in my life. My sister-in-law, although she wasn't my sister-in-law back then, and her journey through rhabdoid cancer as a teenager is what changed my life. So that person that I was back then, that, as I call it, shithead that I was back then, that began a series of events that completely changed my life and turned me into the person that I've sort of evolved into now. I lost my favorite uncle earlier this year to
sorry.
cancer. Thank you. And of course, my father, who was thankfully healthy and recovering, thanks to Dr. Haas and the Cyberknife unit
Yes.
at Winthrop, who are awesome. So I want to talk to you a little bit briefly. I didn't really want this to be the focus of the interview because this is not you. This is
Well, it's
who
not my
Carol-
whole story. It's
This
a
is
piece of my story.
This is a tiny piece of your story,
Yep.
although super important. And so that's why I just wanted this to be a tiny part of the interview. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and whatever level you're comfortable with, of course, why it's so important that as leaders, we share the things that we've learned in order to possibly help somebody that's experiencing this, whether it's now or down the line. Because, and this is interesting, I was watching a special on ABC last week. I don't know if you caught this, the Alex Trebek special.
I didn't see it.
Oh, it's so good. So they have their
Making a note.
their greatest champion in the world tournament this
Right.
week. Their 3 biggest champions ever, right? And the special was about Jeopardy and about Alex and what he's going through right now. Of course, he has pancreatic cancer. He revealed that a fan wrote him a note thanking him openly about his cancer and his symptoms. He said, "Thank you, Alex. My brother-in-law decided, because he was experiencing some of the same symptoms that you had announced in your public announcement, to go and see his doctor. Today he found out that he has stage 1 pancreatic cancer. Looks like it's very treatable, so I wanted to thank you because I really feel like you saved his life. I am making a difference with my suffering," Trebek said.
Agreed.
Yeah, as a public figure, and especially a thoughtful one that is a storyteller, right? How important was this for you to get out there and tell this story?
You know, when I look back, because these things happened so fast. I saw you in early September at TED. I was leading a huge conference with almost 900 people, WICT, Women in Cable Television, on the main stage in the main ballroom at the Marriott Marquis, and I was so excited about it, and it went off phenomenally well, Monday, September 16th, and one of my greatest goals was not to cough. During the entire thing, I didn't want to cough because I've been coughing for a year. I had seen my doctor, but now with all this managed care, every time I'd call back after that, and I knew I had reflux, every time I called back after that, I kept getting a PA or an NP. I couldn't get into my doctor. And finally, the morning of September 18th, I was talking on the air, and words would come out like that, like a cough would just involuntarily come out. And I said on the air that morning, I hope I get to see my doctor today. And I got off the air after 4.5 hours, and I called my doctor. And they said, yeah, you can come see the doctor today. And I did. And he took an x-ray of my lung, and he turned gray. And within 2 days, I had a PET scan that night. That was a Wednesday. I had a PET scan that night, the Friday. And Monday, I was in with the oncologist who said, you have stage 4 cancer. And within minutes, in my head came the words, thank you, God, for healing me. But then it was kind of this speeding roller coaster of we have these tests, we have these things we need to do. And I needed to control my narrative. People were going to be talking about it anyway.
Yeah.
And so you might as well get the straight story.
Yeah.
Not because I'm a control freak, but you might as well get the straight story. If I'm going to be off the air for weeks or for months, know what it really is. So that was the first reason. I wasn't sure what I was going to say the day that I videoed the message from the beach, which was that I've shared stories with you over time, good stories, bad stories, and now I'm sharing this story with you. And I don't remember exactly what I said because I really didn't write it out. But I said I've just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and for some reason, I cannot pray for myself right now. So I'm asking all of you, and this was a big motivating factor for me. I can't pray for myself right now. So I need all of you to pray for me or send me positive wishes, whatever it is. However, I can pray for the doctors because they have to get this right. The other, and that was all true. I couldn't pray for me, and I knew the power of prayer, and I am so convinced that the brain tumors are gone and that the lung tumor is shrinking because of the prayer of people. I got prayers from other countries, literally. But here's the other piece of it. My mom served everybody else first. She was one of 7 kids. She was the oldest girl, so she was like back in those days, mama number 2 in the house. And my dad at one point had gone into a coma for 2 months. He'd been very, very healthy. He went into a coma for 2 months. He had pneumococcal meningitis when I was pregnant with Connor, right after I'd gotten married. And Mom took such good care of him after that. He lived for another 8 years. During that time and leading up to it, she had a breast lump that she didn't talk about. Wow. She didn't tell anybody about. And Connor was 1. Connor was 2, and Shane was 1. And Bob had gotten in a car accident. And I needed somebody to babysit. I was going back and forth to doctors and whatever. And one day I hugged my mom. It was February. And I hugged her. And she always wore a lot of sweaters, and she always said she was cold. And after Dad was sick, she always, they changed what they were eating. And I said, Mom, you're a rail. I could feel her ribs. And I went to the doctor with her, and it turned out she had breast cancer. And I sat in the office with her and her doctor. And it was the doctor who had taken care of my dad, who had been in a coma several years earlier. And the doctor turned around to my mother. He said, no, we're not going to the examining room first. We're going to go to my office. And he looked at her and he said, how are your breasts? And she said, one's bad. And he said, which one? The left one. And my head whipped around like I had whiplash. And I said, you knew for 7 years? And she was part of a generation that didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about that kind of thing. And damn it, there is no shame in cancer. There is absolutely no shame in cancer. And that was the other reason that I spoke about it. And I've gotten some of those letters and some of those messages. Thank you so much. I've gone to the doctor since then. I'm going to have my cough checked out since then. Thank you. I'm encouraged to talk about it. You know what? There's something that I need to deal with within my family or within myself. And that's why I did it, because there is no shame in cancer. I needed the prayers, and I got them, hallelujah. But also because I decided at that moment I was not going to do what my mom did.
Yeah.
And you have the courage to ask for that help and that comfort, and that's that tribe mentality that we talked about right at the top of this show. Is you need to lean on that community and that tribe to bring you forward. Between that and your faith and the great doctors that you have,
You got
in your
it.
care.
You nailed it. I say about my friends, I would do anything in the world for you. You know it. I would also ask you for anything. I would. We had friends who came and cleaned out our garage. When I was in the hospital having lung surgery, a storm was coming through. And one of our friends, Chris Gallagher, he's amazing, went to our garage to make sure that our generator was up and running for the new season. And when he went in there, he said, there's too much. We live in an old house, and it's a freestanding garage in the back. He said, there's too much in here. It must drive Carol crazy. He got together a bunch of guys and their sons, and they took everything out of the garage. They cleaned out what we didn't need. It was so helpful. It wasn't me throwing it away. Bob was able to part with some things, maybe some of those old baseball bats or the inflatable, in a way that if I was doing it, maybe I was the mean wife. But with the guys there, they were like, Bob, you really don't need this. It was unbelievable. I mean, the things that our friends have done. I didn't have a Christmas decoration up in the house because once I was finally okay, which was barely Thanksgiving week, I went back to work December 2nd, which was 4 days after Thanksgiving.
Right.
I didn't have a Christmas decoration in my house the second weekend of December. And my old roommate Ellen from Long Beach called and said, how's your house looking? And we had it painted on the outside in the interim. And I said, I don't have up a single Christmas decoration. She said, we're coming this weekend. And she got together a couple of girls and decorated the inside of my house. It's like what Jason said.
And life got a little more normal again, right?
Life got more normal.
But it's
and-
exactly what he said in his text message to you.
Right.
You have to know that you did something right to have all this attention.
And so you've been kicking some major ass these last few months.
Thank you very much.
And I am so happy to hear this. You have been sharing your experiences. You've brought so much light into this world. And this is something I sent to you in a message that I sent to you. Carol Silva's work is not nearly close to being done.
Amen.
Right?
Amen, brother.
So what I'm going to do is, first of all, will you come back one day?
Sure.
Okay. I want to hear this entire journey when it's over, because it will be over, right? I want to hear this entire journey.
Okay.
And I want to do that in and of itself. I want it to be its own show if we can one day. So what I want to jump to real quick is just I want to talk a little bit about the comeback, and then I want to do the big three,
Okay.
because we've kept you here long enough. The comeback. I am a huge sports fan, and so I'm such a sucker for a good comeback story. You announced in May that you were retiring from News 12. Then you were diagnosed in September, and you went away for a little bit. And then you
Detour.
said, oh, I'm not going out like that.
No way.
No.
No way.
I am not ending this spectacular 44-year career on cancer's terms. I'm ending it on mine terms. And so you came back and you did your 3-week farewell run, which was so awesome. You didn't miss a beat. I got up at, I don't know, what time did you go on? 4 in the morning?
4:30 in the morning.
4:30 to watch it. I set my alarm to watch you. And I was in anticipation, like a little kid, right? It was amazing. And so Jennifer's talked about this a lot. We don't really have too much time to go into it, but Elizabeth, Elisa, Rich, oh man, we saw that love there, and they were huge. And not only did I see the support they gave you, but I learned about a lot of the support you had given them over the years, watching Christian when Elisa was going through stuff, and being in the delivery room with Elizabeth, and being with Rich for his surgery. And so I love how you handle that tribe and leadership at its finest. This is where I'll leave this moment, and then we'll jump into the big three. You said the following: we don't compete with each other. The 4 of us work to make each other better. That's the secret to the success of a team, and what a team you guys had.
It's amazing.
Awesome.
And you should all know that Friday night, Elizabeth, Elisa, and I had dinner at Elisa's house, and we had the kids there, and I brought down my Christmas presents a little bit late for the kids, and we were just totally hanging around. 2:15 this morning. It's the first day back to a normal schedule at News 12. And last week didn't feel like a retirement week. 2:15 on the nose this morning I woke up. And I texted Elizabeth and Elisa, And I said, good morning, have a great day. I love you.
Love it.
It is
Love
still, we are still the family that we are. They're really excited because now I can do more babysitting and help clean out closets and do all those things that I've also done with them over time.
Yeah, I love it. Carol, one sentence. What advice do you have for Erin Colton jumping into the anchor desk?
Be you. She is so bright. She is so energetic. I said to her, the worst thing about her becoming the morning anchor is that we have lost the best street reporter.
Yeah, she's good.
In New York.
She's good.
Maybe in the country. She is phenomenal. She could be making, cannolis with the Nonas at Glen Cove for their St. Rocco Festival, and all of a sudden there's an accident at a train or an MS-13 body has been found. And 18 minutes later, she can be on the scene, and it's the completely other pocket of her brain that deals with the heartbreaking news. She is so bright. She's wonderful. She's going to be great. So my advice to her, be yourself, girlfriend.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. What is next for Carol Silva?
What's next for me is to learn more, to expand, to grow, and to share it.
Yeah.
We can't wait for that.
We can't wait.
We
We're so,
can't
and
wait.
we hope we could be a part of it too.
Yes,
in some way.
absolutely.
This is the team. The tribe just grew.
I love it. I
tribe just
love
grew.
that. I love when my tribe grows with
All right.
great people.
Here we go. The
Okay.
big three.
The Big Three from the Launchcast.
First one. So big three. This is your top three quick answers, right? Mm-hmm. Top three spark moments in your life.
Oh gosh. I mean, I guess the day that I decided that I had a crush on Bob Riley was absolutely one of them. It was. I told Lee Tyrell, she was with me. A spark moment was March of 1987 when I did that debate at the Nassau Bar Association. And I wasn't humble then. I turned around when Stephen Scaring, the assistant district attorney, said, you're great, why aren't you in News 12? Don't ask me, ask him.
Yeah.
So I would say that's another one. And maybe my decision to share my diagnosis. Now, before that, I would definitely have to say the birth of my first child, and then equally of Shane.
Yeah.
But that birth, when I saw that baby,
Yeah.
it's just such a moment. And George, you'll never be a mom. You can be the greatest dad in the world, but you'll never be a
Yeah.
mom.
I get it. I understand what you're saying. Top three female leaders at this very moment.
Ellen DeGeneres. And now I know there was some award show last night that I didn't see. I don't even know which one it was. I'm not huge on the award shows. It has nothing to do with that. I almost didn't want to say it. I didn't see the show. It's because she is a comeback kid. She is who she is. And she tells us to be nice to each other, be kind to each other. She ends everything with that. So definitely Ellen DeGeneres. There's a woman named Elizabeth McCall. She is a Long Islander. Elizabeth is the mother of 7 children. And Elizabeth was the New York State banking superintendent on September 11th. She was in Tokyo, got on board the only plane in the world that was really flying, and it was picking up American important officials and bringing them back to the United States. Got the banks up and running in 2 days, which is phenomenal. Went on to work for a company that would help companies that were having financial difficulties examine where they were in trouble, where they were screwing up, and became very well known around the world for that. Was invited in to straighten out the Vatican Bank, was invited in to straighten out the Vatican economy. She tried for 2 years to do that. And now she is with Christine Lagarde in the European Central Bank Board. This mom from Long Island with 7 kids.
Wow.
She's phenomenal. She's an absolute world leader. We need women in leadership positions because we bring a different sensibility to it. And she is one of the finest. And people in the business world know who she is. Everybody should know who she is. And the other is moms. Is really moms. It's, I was talking to Bob about this because I know you do your threes. And I said, any working mom, and every mom works inside the home, and some also work outside the home. And it's not an easy job, but it is a job of the greatest leadership that there is.
Certainly
Yes, it
is.
is. Yes, it is. Top 3 News 12 moments.
Definitely September 11th.
Okay.
When I first got there, my first winter, I told the assignment desk, crusty old New York City assignment desk people who decided what stories to do, that I wanted to do a story on homelessness. They said, we don't have homeless on Long Island. You Long Island people don't have homeless. I said, give me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Within 45 minutes after a phone call to the Interfaith Nutrition Network, I was standing in a cardboard community in the snow alongside the Meadowbrook Parkway, and I met Julio. And I did his story and how the inn was helping him. And he had lived in an SRO. He was a poor guy. He'd had some issues, but he was working. He was a maintenance guy at Roosevelt Field Mall. A kid living in another room in the SRO found matches, and the place burned down, and he lost everything. He was homeless. I did the story, and two guys in their 20s from Baldwin who had bought a house called News 12 and said, we want to take Julio in until he gets back on his feet.
Oh, that's great.
That's incredible.
That is a moment. And then the send-off of the century.
Yes.
I mean, what can I say? My
Yes.
last day, my last week. Elizabeth and Elisa, who literally wrote, we all have a story, but they wrote and immortalized mine. Everybody deserves that. I
was
don't know
great.
that we'll all get it, but they were phenomenal.
It was
So
great.
That's
It was
my
great
other.
to see.
Yeah.
Top 3 lessons you've learned from cancer.
I'm strong, I'm honest, and I'm tough, and I'm loved.
I'll give you 4.
Yeah, thanks. I took 4.
Top 3 failures.
I wasn't always this nice, but I have grown. That's probably the first that comes. Not getting the job at News 12 the first time, but I learned how to keep going. And I failed trig in high school at Holy Trinity. I got a 49 on the Regents. And I thought that, kind of study and work more on the stuff that you're good at. No, don't. Work on the stuff you're not good at.
Love it. Top 3 accomplishments.
My children, that's 3. The sense of optimism and faith that I have is my other greatest accomplishment, and my absolute drive and nature to help others.
I love it. I love it. That's a great way to end this. Real quick, I'm going to do the inspiration for the week, as we always do here in the Launchcast. And today's inspiration is actually inspired for me by some of the story that we've gone over today. We heard about Carol's entire journey throughout her incredible 44-year career, and how at the end of the career, she had a little tiny speed bump, which of course, Carol is doing what she's doing. She's going to kick major ass and get through this speed bump. But we're talking about Carol's diagnosis, her cancer diagnosis. And so for me, cancer has had a profound effect on my life in many different ways. And probably one of the most profound effects is losing my sister-in-law, which was not my sister-in-law at the time, Shannon Sirks, who was the person that really changed my life in so many different ways. One of the biggest changes that she caused was really opening up my heart to the idea of inspiring other people and motivating others. So in a way, she had a big part to play in creating this podcast and this leg of my career. Shannon was diagnosed at 15 years old with rhabdoid cancer, and she suffered for about 2 years before she finally lost that battle in 2013. Shannon was attempting to write a manuscript, and she didn't get very far in it, but she shared it with me, and I was so honored by that. And so I want to share a little excerpt, which was really the first page, the first paragraph of the first page of this manuscript, where she talked about the story she was about to tell about cancer. So the paragraph read, "This is a story of conquering fears and working through the obstacles life throws at us. Courage is found when times are bleak. Inspiration is discovered when thoughts are lost. Love is known when there is support in both the good and the bad days. Family and friends come together with love, faith, and hope." And that's really the mantra of what she taught me. This has become the mantra of my life. And it's all because of the profound effect that cancer had on my life, indirectly, really, because I wasn't the one that suffered it, although myself and family and friends suffered emotionally because of the loss of Shannon. But what a legacy to leave, right? This girl inspired the founding of a nonprofit called Shannon's Fight, which was tremendous and did so much good work for so many people. She inspired so many others. My other sister-in-law, who we're so proud of right now, just got a job with Northwell, the organization in the hospital that is helping our friend here, Carol Silva, beat her cancer. And so my sister-in-law just became a nurse because of the inspiration of her sister, Shannon. How huge is that? My wife, Shannon's other sister, was just inspired to be a better person and to help others, throughout her life because of her sister. So many people we know changed because of that. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that in today's moment of inspiration and let you guys know that those moments of change, they could be found anywhere. Those spark moments that could really change your life. I wasn't expecting this moment. I wasn't expecting to find Shannon and meet her at my karate school, but I did. And here we are 9 years later, and my life is completely different, and I have her to thank for it in all the positive ways. So that's our moment of inspiration today. Thank you, Shannon, for everything you've done. Wow. What an episode this has been. I'm so honored that you joined us today. This was so incredible, and I'm honored that this was the first step after News 12 into the next journey. I'm so thankful for Jennifer for being here today. We talked at length about this, and I'll let everybody in on the secret. I'm still toying with this format, right? I'm still toying with this format. I'm really happy about how our interviews are going, but I am seeing that with the research I do and the type of interview it is, it's hard for a second person to be here. And so originally the thought was to have a rolling co-host, a new guest co-host every episode. And then I did one episode without one, and I was like, ooh, I kind of like this. But I had asked Jen to be on this one because this was an important one, and I knew that she could handle this well. And so she said to me, feel free to say no, because I know you don't have a co-host now. I said, no, we could do this together. I know we could pull this off. So I'm so thankful that you joined this, Jen. This was great.
And I'm glad that I got to spend time with you and get to know you.
Thank you, Carol. I feel the same.
For the first time.
Yes, for the first time.
Yeah.
Not the last time.
Not
the last time. No, we're going to have, this will be a two-parter for sure, and then we will have you back for the next part of the story. So
Yeah.
We're going
to
hold you up on that.
You know what this means? We did it.
Woo! Woo!
We did it, guys. Thank you for joining us on the Launchcast. Follow me at Launchpad CEO. Follow the Launchcast. Carol's doing her stretches.
I am.
Carol's
It's time
doing
to
her stretches.
stand.
Follow the Launchcast on Facebook, on Instagram. Subscribe to us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know the deal. All these places, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
God bless.
Launch sequence terminated.
Into the black hole.
Thanks for listening to the Launchcast today. Please make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available. Follow me, George Andriopoulos, at Launchpad CEO on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And make sure to visit our website, guys, thelaunchcast.com. Looking forward to the next episode. See you soon, guys.